today with my friend Jeremy Vaughan, and I'm really excited to have this conversation about health, wellness, really living on purpose, and most importantly, like learning from our rock bottom moments that make us who we are and who we're meant to be. My book that's coming out, the Turn Your Light On book, it's all about awakening your inner alchemist and also turning your biggest traumas and downfalls in your life into your greatest gifts and life purpose. And I know that Jeremy is all about turning his rock bottom moments into the work that he does now. So thank you so much for being here, Jeremy.
Thanks, Deidre.
Yeah.
Also exciting news about the book.
Yeah, well, it's not out yet, but it will be. It will be out in the new year, and I'm so excited about it. And so, on the conversation right away, like let's just get right into it. So I truly believe that our biggest traumas, and as you know, I speak and teach on this, and I know you're in this space as well with counseling and life coaching and all of the work that you're doing. When we talk about traumas potentially being our greatest gifts to the world, like I'd love for you just to dive into what got you to this moment, and what was a trauma or a moment in time that really got you to pay attention to life and shift your direction. And we're going to pick it apart together. So over to you, Jeremy.
I appreciate how you go deep right away. So for me, it was going to prison for 3 years. So I spent 3 years incarcerated on the United States in California. So that was inherently my rock bottom moment in my life. And there was accumulation of things that led up to that moment where I was put in handcuffs and sent away for a few years. We can dive into that stuff there too, but really my rock bottom moment was being incarcerated for those 3 years, and really being faced with a moment of truth for me, like what do I want to continue on my life with? And I can see my path laid out for me in front of me. Do I want it to be full of the same thing I just experienced for the last few years? Or do I want to try to create a new path for myself that's going to be a little bit more aligned with who I actually am and what I actually want to do, and create more impact? So that's the nitty gritty about my rock bottom. Spending some pretty non-enjoyable times behind bars, let's just say that. It's not the most friendly system down the States. And I did go through a lot of traumatic experiences and a lot of hardship down there, but it really gave me a good perspective on life and gave me a lot of good lessons from that. So I would never want to take that away from myself and do it over again.
Absolutely. I mean, like once we learn the lesson, hopefully we don't learn the lesson and we move on. But sometimes it's like, no, I'm not done learning the lesson. I'm just going to keep doing this over and over and over again until hopefully it stops. So if we go back, like before all of this happened, and you and I have had some conversations before this talking about, working with youth and signs and symptoms that potentially something's off. So like, what led you to go to prison, and what were some signs and symptoms that something wasn't right within yourself that led to that point? Because I really do believe that everything that happens in life, we have spiritually aligned chaos is what I like to call it. When we're on this path, we're doing all these things and it's like, why is this happening to me? But then there's signs and symptoms that can lead to the big rock bottom moment or thing that we do that goes against who we truly are at our core, which is also soul school. But what are some of the signs and symptoms that were showing up within yourself that potentially someone could see from the outside and if they were more aware?
Yeah, great question. So that's what led me to being in that industry of the drug trade, was a complete kind of disconnection from myself, and it was a feeling of being lost. So it started essentially later in elementary school for me. Essentially when I was starting to become, I shifted from one friend group to another. And within that, I then started to become lost in who I was and where I really wanted to, I guess, quote unquote, fit in. So I started to have a sensation of feeling lost, not sure where I really wanted to land and be around, and what felt good for me. So I was always seeking out other things outside of myself about, where do I fit in? Where do I feel at home? And it was a continualization through high school and then into my later teens outside of high school, where I was continually just searching. So I was innocent, lost, bouncing around different friend groups, never quite diving intimately in with friend groups. So, kind of staying on the edge. So that way, in case something went wrong, I could hop out. So definitely some signs for me was not that connected to those people around me, and inherently not very connected to myself. Numbing out in a way. I started to smoke weed. I started to get into drugs. So for me, it was the biggest thing for me was the disconnection, which then led me into feeling like this group of people that I started to become involved with within the drug trade felt like family, because they gave me a lot of attention. They brought me right in. And then from there, I was like, wow, these guys really get me. Like, this feels like home. All the while, my adolescent brain doesn't realize that I am being, manipulated in that situation. But to me, because I was vulnerable, I latched onto them. They showed me, in a sense, love that I wasn't getting somewhere else, because I was also still kind of disconnected from even my family. As much as my family showed me love, I wasn't really receiving it. Yeah.
Interesting. It's so interesting how someone can give us love, but if there's potentially not that openness and willingness to, or even tools to articulate what's really going on in that moment, it's very easy to go outside for love, validation. You mentioned numbing. When I think of like unhealed trauma at the root of it all, I really do believe that what's going on in the world with numbing, pornography, lots of dating, like constantly, like the swiping right on apps, like really everything that's going on in the world, all the quick hits, the obesity, the being so busy with work. I know I'm generalizing and taking it into different areas here, but I really do believe this is how we numb. This is how we avoid ourselves when things are going on. And then as you're speaking about something that's so relevant right now, like in your story around manipulation, there's so much manipulation on earth with advertising, with like just everything is from outside in rather than inside out. So this space when you were feeling lost and you were wanting to fit in and latching on to a group of people that were showing you love, like, or a lot of attention, when did you wake up? When was that moment? Bring us back to the moment. Potentially maybe you were fully in it and you had a moment in time where like, maybe I'm being used and manipulated here, or was it after you went to prison? Like, tell us about a moment in time when you realized, oh, this isn't love, this is something else. Let's go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For me, there was two moments. The biggest one that created change for me was when I was incarcerated already, but one happened before that, when my parents found out what I was doing, and I had lied to them. So I'd gone way down the dark deep end here and was lying to my parents about where I was. And within that, they had found out where I was. And, my dad was saying, like, listen, like, these guys are taking advantage of you. You need to come home immediately. You're going to get caught. And sure enough, I had latched onto these people so much that I didn't see it, but then I had a little bit of like a flicker of a flame, be like, you might be right. But I didn't really listen to it much because I was so wrapped up in that space. So it really took me to become completely detached from them and that organization, to then being in prison and having nothing but time to really sit with it and be like, well, were these people actually good for me? Or was I just being manipulated? Or in a sense, I was just a vulnerable person around an environment that really manipulated myself, right? So for me, it really landed for me when I was in prison, and I had the time to sit with it because I had no other things to distract me, no numbing agents I could use. So really, I had nothing else but to sit with it, or to sit in it, I guess, in a sense, is a better word. So where on the outside, when my dad brought that up, I had ways of numbing out. I had ways of distracting myself, whether I'd go to the casino and play poker, whether I'd just go out and have some drinks, or, I'd go on my cell phone, or, multiple different things like we have in our lives now that can just be a distraction, right? If we don't want to deal with something, great, something else can take our attention and it's totally fine. And we don't even have to think about it, right? So yeah, the biggest part for me was having that time and space to really sit in my shit. That was
I mean, as you're even talking about the casino and this and that, I started to like internally giggle a little bit because I just like when I think of you, Jeremy, and I didn't know your past self, like I didn't know Jeremy, the drug dealer, like I didn't know this guy. Like it to me, it's like so far from who I know you as today, which is, you know, this is a sign that we're evolving and we're growing because we all have different stages of our life. You know, if I think of the past version of me 5, 10 years ago, you wouldn't recognize me either. But you know, one of the things that you said that I really want to like pull out and dissect a little bit is when you were in prison and you were detached from people, when you didn't have anything to grasp onto. I think this is a really good teaching moment right now because what happens is we are constantly distracted. Social media, people telling us who we should be, who we think we are, all these things. And it's like when we're constantly looking outside of us, looking outside of us or around things that are influencing us, it's very difficult to gain perspective. So it took you, you know, your dad gave you the hint, like probably didn't come off as a nudge. He was probably like really like saying like, Jeremy, like, come on. And you were like, man, like, it's good. They love me. Like, we have fun. Like, whatever the thing was, that hit, right? And that belonging. And then it took you, like, you didn't have that until you were fully detached from them and you didn't have any distractions. So I love to talk about this in the metaphor of it's kind of like a drug, like relationships, whether it's intimate relationship, whether it's relationships as far as manipulative relationships in that space and or physically actually doing drugs, getting space from it can feel like a drug and the withdrawals can be really, really strong. So as you were detoxing, we'll say you were away detoxing for a couple of years. What was that like for you in the first while? Like, what was it like to, you know, be taken away and say, this is where you need to be for the next, you know, 2 or 3 years? What was that experience like for you at the beginning, in the middle, and like, who did you turn into? Like, how did it make you and how did it break you? Like, we want to feel Jeremy. Like, I want to feel like I'm Jeremy in the experience, just being like arrested. Like, I want, like, bring me into the experience because there's so many metaphors here with your story that's blowing my mind.
So there's at the beginning, I was in complete denial.
Right.
So, you know, when I got arrested, I was involved with some heavy hitters, and I felt like I would never be caught. I felt like I was invincible. No one can touch me. Right. So even when I got arrested, I was like, oh, I'm going to be out of here tomorrow. So I was living in a fantasy land about like, you know, I'd even be detaching from my own self. So I'd be lying there thinking that this is just a dream. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be out of here. You know, when you're sitting in an 8x10 cell all day long, I have 1 hour out a day to shower and, you know, maybe walk around a little bit. You know, it gives you a lot of time to sit in that, but it also gives you a lot of time to daydream and in a sense, detach even from where you are. So that's what I was doing for a while in a sense of my withdrawal, right? My withdrawals were a lot of the daydreaming, you know, pretending like this actually is not happening. Many things. Watching TV. They had a little TV you could watch for like the entire cell block. And it was pretty much, I'd say about 2 months in that I had this like, you know, light bulb moment of like, listen, like I told this is a conversation with myself. I'm like, listen, Jeremy, like you were here for potentially, you know, 3, 5, maybe up to 10 years. I didn't know how long I was going to be in there for. And there's a choice I can make right now. I can look around myself and I can see what my path would be like if I continue down here and continue down the same people, detaching from myself, coping with drugs or alcohol or sex or gambling, whatever it may be. And I can see it. It's all around me from people coming in and out. And I didn't want that. I was like, you know, I started to wake up to like, you know, my younger self about like, you know, I'm innately curious. I love helping people out. And I just felt like this is not me. Like, what the hell am I doing here? I almost like woke up and like, where the hell am I? You know, how did I land myself here? And it was this epiphany in prison that allowed me to start to, what do you call it? Course correct, right? And I could see myself going down a certain road and I did not want to go down that road. So I course correct and be like, I don't know what's on this other road, but I'm willing to work for it because I'm passionate about changing my life and going down that road, right? So there's a metaphor called grit, right? So like I felt like within that, I started to develop a lot of grit. So grit has two things: the passion for something and the perseverance to get through something hard to get towards whatever you're working towards, right? So for me, it was working towards getting out of that environment. So I just continued to work day in and day out. Like again, in an 8x10 cell, I only get an hour, maybe 2 hours out a day. So I had a lot of time. I had a lot of time to sit with, okay, how did I land myself in this position? So, I start journaling, I start meditating, I start reading, I start writing, exercising, really valuing my body and with what I put into it, both, by food, by education, books, people, even. You'd be surprised within an environment like that there's actually some really good influences within that prison setting, as long as you're mindful about who you're spending time with. So I started to notice these things. So what I put in my body matters, who I put myself around matters, right? And then that's all going to influence maybe how then I start to see the world, right? And then I can also influence those people around me as well. So these things started to click for me, where I was like, okay, well, the people around me matter, what I'm putting in my body matters, and my brain, and then how I'm thinking about everything within that context matters, right? So then I can start to take that step day after day after day. And that adds up to me sitting there knowing now how long I have in prison. I got sentenced to 5 years. And then, long story short, my original lawyer got disbarred. And then I got a new lawyer. And then they got 2 years taken off, the maximum that it could. So I'm forever grateful for that. And then now I knew, okay, I have another, it was about 2 years at that point left. Okay, let's make the most of this, right? I don't want to waste another day, right? Like this is now I'm fueled. I have my fuel, and I know my exit point, and I'm going to work intently towards improving myself, influencing those people around me positively, and then as well showcasing, modeling, let's say, for those around me that, hey, change is possible in this environment, right? And again, no matter where I was, so I went to 3 different prisons within that time. No matter where I was like a magnet for these people that, that are like, oh, like you seem to be doing things differently. Like I'm curious, and I'm like, oh yeah, like let's have a chat. But then again, I'd be attracted to those type of people as well in there. So it was like this kind of like, people would be attracted to me in that mindset, and I'd be attracted to other people in that mindset, right? So everyone that I ran into within that environment started to really add fuel to my passion of like, hey, I'm really changing my life, and those people around me really want to see me change my life, and then I also want to see them change their life. So it really, really started to click for me in that middle point about the people I put myself around has an extreme impact on my success as well, right? So it's not just strictly about my own self, but it's also about what I'm putting myself around. So even in a harsh environment like prison, I could still find people that wanted to change and wanted to create that mindset and care for themselves and care for others, right? And at the end of that, when I was leaving that place, I had such resilience in who I was and where I was going towards, right? So that grit component, I had that fuel of passion, knowing that, okay, I got my path. I'm on my path now. I don't know what's ahead of me outside of here, but I'm a believer in where I'm going, rather than just numbing out and trying to forget about where I'm going, right? So that was a big distinction for me. When I first went in, I had no idea essentially who I really was, right? I had forgotten, right? Because I didn't really like where I was going. So I was trying to numb out, right? Where now I'm like, I don't want to numb out. I want to be all in on my experiences in life, right? And continue to learn and absorb and put myself around people that have that similar mindset, right? So that's kind of where I started, and that's where I ended. And when I walked out of the prison gates, I guess you can call it.
Yeah, I can see them opening.
the light
like I'm free, but I'm already free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother thing too, right? Like, I like not wanting to contain myself mentally, right? That was a huge flip for me. Is I know that I am mostly contained physically. I can do some exercises within my 8x10 cell, but I can't walk out and buy myself a Starbucks coffee or something.
Right.
But they can't contain me psychologically. right? And mentally. So I started to really hone in on that and be like, okay, well, whatever I feed myself mentally right now, and also the conversations that I have with people, and how I see that, that's up to me right now. I have that choice. So starting to take back that power of choice for myself was a huge flipping point as well near the beginning. Yeah.
This is so good. I love this whole story. It's Kate. So I just want to go back to something that you said at the beginning because it was so good. So you said you were in denial for a couple months. I think this is so interesting because if we just like dissect this a little bit, I mean, there's so many pieces I want to go through, but let's just start there. Like starting at denial, like how common is that in the world that we live in, right? With denial, with anything like addiction, not being happy. And it's so easy to distract and daydream and be like, this isn't really happening, right? And it's really cool that you had that within a couple of months, right? A couple of months in prison, and just really making the most of it. And then it's like what you're feeding yourself every time, every day, in every way. We're constantly feeding ourselves, and it's very easy to be the byproduct of an environment that we're in and be like, oh, this happened to me. But it's really like you decided this happened for me, and I'm going to make the next 2 years. How are your parents when they'd come to visit? Like, what was that experience like for them when they first came to visit? Like, I'm just curious about the dynamic there. Give us a little insight.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll let you know that. Then I want to touch on something that you mentioned at the beginning. So yeah, the parent situation. So where I was at the beginning, when someone comes to visit you, you're talking to them through a phone and seeing them through plexiglass, right? So you can't even have physical contact with someone walking in. So that was for the first year and a half. When I got sentenced, they were in the federal court room. My parents were, and at this point too, I wrote the judge a very passionate letter, like 3-page letter. And the judge brought my parents into the chambers and said, like, my gosh, this is probably the best letter I've ever received from someone. I can really see that your son is not meant to be in this position. And I've given him every chance that I can with like reducing the amount of time that I can, because I believe in him. Right. And when my parents told me that, I was so riled up. I'm like, yes, this is like confirmation now for sure, that like, not that I'm looking for that validation, but confirmation that, yes, this is a good step forward for me. Right. So the relationship with my parents was rocky at the beginning. That phone call at the beginning when I first got arrested was the hardest phone call I've made in my life. For them to then, I can only imagine what it would be like as a parent picking up the phone and saying, there's a collect call from Sacramento County Jail from, and I could barely even get my name out. I'm just like, Jeremy, like, like I was just so distraught. Right. And like, I just knew how much pain this is going to cause them. And, but they supported me. They gave me unconditional love. And I love them to this day and forever for that, because it really helped me out. And it was a continual work in progress of that relationship with them, because inherently I broke the trust, right? I broke the trust big time. And it took a lot of work to try to mend that back together. And, even to this day, like we have a far better relationship now, but it's still, there's still a little bit of friction sometimes within that relationship. And I think it's probably natural, to be honest, for my relationship with them. But it's come a long ways, and to reestablish that trust and ensure that they can believe in me and trust in me, right? That I'm not lying to them and trying to manipulate them or like that. Going back to something you mentioned before, asking about the parents, about the denial, right? And denial, it's a huge thing nowadays for sure. Like, denying your reality or even denying that something is happening. There's two things there, maybe someone's used to having their reality denied previous to that.
Yeah.
So they want to go into that mindset. But then also the first thing that we can do is like be aware of what's going on. Once we're aware of it, now we can either accept it or deny it, right? So, even by you denying something, you're still at least aware of something going on. So it's still like, in a sense, a little bit of a step forward, a little bit. So it's giving you the option now to be like, you can accept your reality or you can deny it, right? And for me, the biggest part was owning my reality, right? I had to own and take responsibility for me landing myself in that position, right? Even though someone had told on me, right? And I used that beginning, like, oh my God, someone put me here. And no, I put myself here. I take ownership for this. I am accepting about where I am right now. Okay, now I can continue to take that step forward, right? So I'm not putting the blame on someone else because inherently that was my choice, right? So I just want to touch on that a little bit because when you mentioned that, it just brought those two things up for me.
I love it. So a few things that have come up so far is really about, the first thing that we talked about was the not feeling aligned or knowing who you were, right? So one of the signs and symptoms that you are potentially on this path that wasn't, aligned with, just who you're meant to be, but everything's a part of the whole picture anyway. So it's all good. But at the time, the first, what was going on at the beginning before all of this happened was you didn't know where you belonged. You didn't have that belonging. You didn't know who you were and you wanted to fit in, it's just like wanting to fit in with life and feel like we belong somewhere. And then you were mentioning that you were looking outside of yourself to find home and not really staying anywhere too long and just kind of in and out of different circles. And then you found this new family of drug dealers, and they became your home, and you felt loved for the first time in a way that potentially you hadn't experienced it before. And little did you know that they were manipulating you and grooming you and all of that. And then what happened was someone told on you, and you went to prison, and a couple months into it, you moved out of denial, or maybe you were acknowledging the denial, we were making progress, and then boom, you're like, where am I? This isn't me. And I think a lot of people have these moments, at different parts in our life, whatever the resistance is, whatever the story is. And it's like, this isn't me. Who have I been? Why have I been showing up this way? And in that moment, you had this, this opportunity to continue on the path that you've been on, which you realize this actually isn't my true identity, or continue on that path, which probably wouldn't serve you, or take a different path. And what I really love, something that you said was, I didn't know what was on this road, but I was willing to work for it. Woo! So I'm gonna say it again.
Yes.
So you said, you didn't know what was down this road, but you were willing to work for it. This is the most, like everything you shared so far, Jeremy, is like, boom, so much wisdom bombs coming through. And that's why I'm dissecting it. But that alone, it's like, this is what happens every single time we have an opportunity to create a change, even if we don't know what that looks like is. But I love that you said you didn't know what it was. So you had trust in yourself. You had trust in the unknown. You knew that the path you were on wasn't working anymore, and you were willing to work for it. You knew it wasn't just going to be handed to you. You had to show up for it. And that is really impressive. Is there something that you want to add there?
Well, first off, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, it's, change is inherently scary, right? We're told that change is scary in a sense, right? We are used to the comforts of the same thing day in, day out, right? And we're sold that kind of picture, right? Live in comfort, how to make your life the most comfortable it can possibly be. And then when something rocks your world, you're like, how the hell do I get out of this? I'm not used to anything hard. Life should be easy. And I'm not saying that life should be inherently tough all the time, but there's a level of building that kind of, let's say, resilience and putting yourself in a bit of hardship, because it's almost like when you get on the other side of that hardship, this new entity comes out of yourself, right? Like your new person, and that new sense of yourself can't come out without that sense of struggle or hardship, right? And that's a really important piece in any change, right? Change is never going to be easy, otherwise, my gosh, like we wouldn't be having these types of conversations. People change their life left, right, and center, be like, oh, it's fantastic, So there's a level of struggle within that and discomfort that a lot of people have a hard time with, because we're sold this idea that life is meant to be comfortable, right? And there's a balance point between it being inherently hard all the time. No one wants to have a hard life all their life. It's a balance, right, of knowing that, like, hey, I'm going to try something new. I don't know what's on the other side of that, but I know there's a potential for me to grow from this experience, right? or I can sit back and relax and cool. I could chill out and have the same day in and day out. But like if you're wanting that, all power to you. But I don't think a lot of people actually deep down want that. I think a lot of people want to experience the newness and things and experience the change and growth, right? We're all capable of a lot of growth in life, right? As long as we're able to step into the sense of the unknown with some trust, right? Trusting that, you are taking a step forward. And when that foot plants down on the ground, you have a better, perspective of things. And if that's not the right path for you, then guess what? You can take another step forward and pivot your foot a little bit, right? And change, whatever it may be, right? So, but it's the willingness to take that step and not have your feet like just planted on the ground, right? Like the beautiful things in life are usually at the kind of the edges of your comfort zone. So you can start to push the boundaries a little bit rather than, stay in the center. And now maybe as life goes on, you wonder what life could be like on the outside, right? And then you just sit in that sense of like, I wonder what life could be like, right? Right. Because you're stuck in the sense of like, oh, like it's too scary out there for me. Because again, like we're used to it being comfortable, right? And I'm a proponent of putting yourself in voluntary hardship, right? Not all the time, but regularly, where you can experience a sense of discomfort, right? And really challenge yourself to adapt to the situation, be flexible, right? Continue to build your resiliency, right? And it'll pay off tenfold in your growth, what you learn, who you meet, where your life goes, and also maybe potentially help you out and when something really big and unforeseen pops up, right? Because you have that trust. You're like, I got this, rather than being like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. Like, and then that's when you go to that numbing, right? We go to that numbing when we can't, it's too much, it's overwhelming for us, right? So it really helps you maybe safeguard from some of those experiences, right? And also having support. So like having support like coaches or going to groups or whatever it may be, and getting help can also be a form of growth as well for someone, right? Because you're seeking that support from people who are really invested in you and invested in seeing you succeed and grow in life, right? Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Absolutely. I'm just nodding my head. I'm like, yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I really do love the voluntary hardship. One of the things that I really believe, at least this is what I do in my life, and I find it really powerful, is every time I'm in tune with something that scares me, I have a rule that I say yes. Like if I'm afraid to speak in front of a group of people or ask a question, it can be something as simple as asking a question or doing something like that scares me. I'm like, well, that's the thing I got to do. Like that's the work that I got to do so that I can break free from these limitations that I put upon myself. And the more that we do that voluntary hardship, is the more resilient we become, or the more unleashed we become, the more we can inspire, as you were talking about, when you were in that space for a few years, inspire others to do the same and break free from, these limitations that are programming, that are safety mechanisms, that are, just not really knowing. And it's, I like to use the idea around a light, like my signature program is called Turn Your Light On, right? And it's like, when your light's off and you can't see, it's very hard to take a first step, right? Very difficult. We're in fear, we're in anxiety, we're in all these things. When we're at the flickering light stage, we can see a little bit. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. And then when our light's on, we can see, but what direction are we going? And then there's a laser focused light really moving forward. And so when I think of what you're saying here around the idea of moving forward, of understanding that we are here to grow, we are here to be uncomfortable. It's also, I think about one of the things that you mentioned was, you might want to just be comfortable. And then you were like, well, I don't really think, but you might. The comfortable though, comfort becomes uncomfortable. It becomes uncomfortable because people who are stuck in comfortability are often stuck in stagnation. So there's usually weight gain, there's usually unprocessed emotions because there's fear, there's barriers there, there's resentment, there's all this stuff that shows up in the body as dis-ease. And this is depression because unexpressed emotion, especially if it's anger or disappointment, turns into depression because it's self-hate. And all of these things can show up in the body. So physical health problems, that is from not taking action on the little nudges that we get. That's my belief system behind it. So actually, like, what we do, the resistance that we move through in the training, like this is all about the training, being in the court, being in the game. It's about taking action when you feel that resistance, because when we move through resistance, there's freedom on the other side. There's a breakthrough, and that's where a lot of healing, transformation, and change happens, creativity, flow, all the things. And so I really wanted to touch on that because I really do feel like being in one place and being comfortable is actually why a lot of people are sick today. And I used to be that person. I was in my comfort zone. I was doing the same thing over and over again for years in my life, checking things off a list. I had chronic pain. I had different types of autoimmune disease. I was depressed. I had all this stuff going on because I was staying safe. But my body, my heart, my soul was saying, you should do that thing. But I was like, no, it's too scary. It's too this. So if you're listening or watching right now, like, let this just be like a gentle, friendly reminder from Dee and Jeremy to get outside of your comfort zone, have an accountability partner, have a coach. Coaches are like, honestly, having a coach in your corner is one of the most valuable things you can do. I always think every single time I invest in myself in that way, I know I'm going to get it back many, many times at work, counseling, or whatever it is. Because these people hold your hand when you're scared. They coach you. They see the best side of you. And we all need that. And so when you were in that space for a few years, first you saw people who inspired you, probably, that were, on the path of more personal development. Despite your environment, you found the people that were on a different path. So there's always those options around us. They're always being presented, podcasts, people, events, all that. And then by doing that and letting someone support you, you become someone who could support other people. So that's the beautiful gift about getting outside of your comfort zone, asking for support. It's like we're all here to support each other to become more of who we really are in the world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, to your point, yeah, it's like when you're staying still and you're stagnant, my question is like, what are you repressing, or what are you refusing to face? Because inherently it's like, we will, yeah, to your point, like, when you're repressing these things down, you're again, in a sense, denying your own reality, right? You're denying a part of yourself that wants to go explore, that wants to go in and try new things. And, when that happens, when you're denying a part of yourself that experience, like you're going to make these maybe excuses for yourself to be like, no, it's good. Like, I enjoy this. It's all good. Or you might externally say that to other people, but inherently inside, you might be like, turning over and be like, oh my God, why can't I just take this step? But it's like that acknowledgement that, hey, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to be scared of these things because we're geared and told in society that this is how we should live. So it's totally normal to feel scary, like scared in that sense of like, I don't know how to take that step. I'm unsure. And that's where, people like us come in and can help and support, because we ourselves have been through those things and see, wow, this is what's on the other side. Right. When I'm not playing small, when I'm living to who I want to be and where I want to go, right? Wow, does life ever open up, right? And these experiences and the people that you meet, and and it's just about that kind of, that initial kind of breakthrough. And then you're like, wow, this breakthrough was, a lot of work, but wow, who I see that I've become on the other side of that is fantastic. And I want to see more of that in my life. Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean that like you have to have this wild, drastic change in your life, but it's about, maybe new experiences. Maybe it's about, maybe trying out something new for your first time, or actually trying something out that you've wanted to try for so long, but you've been scared. Checking in, rechecking. Hey, how, like, are these the people that I want to put myself around? Do these people believe in me? Like, or are they just trying to keep me small, or like, keep me in that environment? Right. So it's allowing yourself to really do like a self check in on you yourself, and am I doing what I want to do? Am I putting myself around the people I want to put myself around? And yeah, like, and then expand the walls of yourself. So you're not in that small container, right? You're able to expand out and be like, hey, this is what it's like to be on the edge, to play on the edge, right? And I trust myself that I'm not going to go over the edge, right? But I also trust myself that I can have support in myself at the edge, right? So it's almost like, like people like us, where it's like, hey, we're gonna guide you to the edge. We're going to guide you to the edge and have you experience it, but we're also going to allow you not to fall off the edge, right? We're going to ensure that you experience what it's like to really kind of push the edge out a little bit and see how far you can go. But, rest assured that we got your back, and, we're not going to let you fall, right? So yeah, anyways, yeah, that's what I wanted to put in there as well. Now, yeah.
We're going to take you to the edge, but you're not going to
Yeah.
fall, because we secretly, we've got you. I
Yeah.
love that. And one of the things that you touched on is the people that you surround yourself with. Like, this is seriously everything. Like, the people you surround yourself with, you become. And so really knowing who your inner circle, outer circle is honestly one of the biggest areas that I've done work on in the last couple, probably 2 or 3 years. And it's shifted a lot of my relationships in the best way, though. And it's just like, it's been incredible. And so that's something that I recommend doing if you're not feeling the way that you want to feel, if people aren't supporting you. Like, you can just start to ask yourself, well, what are my core values? Like, what actually really matters to me? And do the people that I surround myself reflect that? And if not, it's like, sometimes like filtering people out of your inner circle, even if you've had a long relationship with them, can be one of the best things that you can do, so that you have space to bloom, right? And then the environments that you're in, like, yes, you can make anything out of any environment, but you also can go into some pretty amazing environments that are around people that are going to like support you, whether it's an event or a group coaching program, or whatever's going on, where you're going to feel uplifted and supported. And then there was another piece there that I really wanted to touch on. Oh, you said tune into your body. Our body has so much wisdom. It blows my mind. Exercising, even taking a few minutes just to scan your body and say, okay, I'm feeling tension here. What does the tension have to tell me? Oh, it's telling me that I'm holding on to something from yesterday. Oh, it's telling me I'm hungry. It's telling me I'm stressed out. It's just like, being in tune with yourself is so important, because your body has so much wisdom. And when you're tuned in, you're always going to have the next answer. And that's another way how you can build self-trust, is tuning into what your body has to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And it's that attunement. So when we're numbing out, we're not actually tuning in, right? We're tuning out that radio frequency, right? It's like, we're tuning to a different channel because we don't want to listen to what's going on, or we're not even sure what channel we're on, right? And yeah, when you tune in and you understand the body is full of wisdom, right? Your intuition. And when you can lean into that intuition and trust it, and you can mix it with a sense of your intuition for really quick action thinking, right? If something just comes to you and it feels deep inside of you that this is for me, you can start to trust it more, right? And for a lot of people that's hard, because maybe you don't trust yourself, and you don't trust yourself, those feelings pop up and you're not going to listen to them, right? Or you're going to be like, no, I don't believe that. And then sure enough, you're proven wrong, right? Because what you felt like you should have done or could have done from that kind of gut instinct ended up happening, right? So it's like a combination, right? So it's listening intently, I think, to the body, and understanding and becoming more in tuned with oneself, for sure. And going back to even like what you had mentioned before about who you put yourself around, and and also doing a check on your friends, the people that you're closest with. Are these people supporting me in my growth and where I wanted to go? And it's okay to maybe start to distance yourself from people that maybe aren't doing that, right? Not you don't have to chop and disregard, right? But like, how like, am I being influenced by those people closest to me in a positive way, right? And the hardest relationships to do that with are people that you've invested a lot of time into, right? For a lot of people, I find that that's a big struggle, is like, oh, I've known these people for 15 years or 10 years, and we're best friends, but then like you can see both people just going in different directions, but it's like you're fighting against reality, right? And rather than just accepting it and be like, okay, we're two totally different people, and maybe we actually shouldn't spend this much time together because it's become toxic for us, right? But it's like we get looped up on the time. Oh, we've spent this much time together, it means we should just stick together forever, in that regard. But also then what I find too a lot with individuals is that the inability to communicate that, right? To communicate what's going on for oneself to another individual, right? Especially intimately, right? So that communication skill really comes in handy about, do I know how to speak about what I'm feeling in a way that's like non-violent and non-combative, right? And I'm not shaming someone or blaming someone. And I think that's a really key piece. I honestly think it should be taught in schools, like communication 101,
Yeah.
and, for sure, how to create intimacy, not in a sexual way, but just like intimacy in general from like a friendship level. What does that mean? And we're not taught these things, so it makes sense that like you have a world full of people that are really good at math and and biology and all this stuff, but like when it comes down to communication, right, with another human being, it's like we're in complete like space. Like, how do I do this? I don't know how to do this. I'm lost. And then it comes across as like, maybe combative or violent, or we act out, or we want to numb out because we're like, I don't know how to have this conversation. I'm overwhelmed and I'm going to shut down. Right. So I think, a big investment for anyone too is like learning, how do I communicate with another human being in a way that shows like empathy and compassion, and really getting across what I want to get across to another person. So then I feel good about that for myself. And then also the other person feels like heard and seen in that as well. Right. That's a big piece of things for me moving forward in the world too, is like, okay, how do I help inspire people to like learn more about communication with themselves, right? Because I know what that was like to not even have those skills, and where it got me as well, right? Not know how to communicate that, like, yeah, I'm doing shitty, or like, or like, I don't think this friendship's good, but I don't even know how to communicate this, so I'm just going to stay in it, right? Because I don't know how to get out.
And I think this is for people pleasers or people who are just in dynamics for a long time, what can happen is resentment can build, and then we can turn into being passive aggressive, like people pleasers. And I used to be a people pleaser, so I get it. We can be, I'm recovered, thank goodness. But you can turn really passive aggressive, right? And it's like, you're like, oh, I'm being nice. It's like, no, you're actually not being nice. You just have a different flavor of meanness than someone who's potentially direct with you, right? So one of the things that I really recommend for people, and I am always teaching and learning communication, because I think there's so many layers to it, and the more you open yourself up and are seen by people, sometimes the more tools you need in order to properly understand another and gain clarity, but also make sure that you're fully understood, because there's so many miscommunications. Like in the human language, every word can mean something different. Like my definition of love could be totally different from yours, or friendship, or whatever. So it's like there's so many layers to it. But the first step I really find, if you're listening and you're having a hard time understanding how you feel, and you are in a space of not knowing how to express yourself, is literally just closing your eyes and talk about the body sensation. I have sweaty palms right now. And then the person that you're telling that to, if you do have an audience, if you do have a person, it's like, oh, maybe they're nervous. And then they might be like, oh, are you nervous? Yeah, or no, it's not quite nervous. Okay, well, what is it? Well, my heart's beating. You know what? I feel anxious. So just processing that with like what's going on in the physical body. When I've been in interesting dynamics, in the last year, like just communication, it's like, well, what do you feel in your body? Oh, you feel, oh, okay. Like, is it this? Is it something else? And just giving that person permission to feel if they're having a hard time communicating, or also yourself. Well, close your eyes. What do you feel in your body? I feel tight in my chest. Oh, just speak that. Well, Jeremy, I'm feeling tight in my chest right now. And then he would probably respond with something. Okay, well, we're going to practice. Jeremy, I feel tight in my chest right now.
So it sounds like something's maybe feeling anxious. You're feeling maybe a little bit restricted.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Is there
feeling,
something on your mind?
I kind of feel hurt actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me more. What is hurting you?
Well, this thing that you said earlier, you probably didn't mean anything by it, but it just made me think of this thing that happened from the past and it really hurt my feelings.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings. Can you tell me more about what that meant for you?
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is good. I love it. I love it. We're role playing right now. But do you see how I was feeling, well, I just made that up, but I'm sure I could act out. But in that moment, I was taking responsibility for how I felt in my body. I was labeling it as a feeling. And then he was like getting curious. He was leaning in, if you're watching. And then he labeled something and I felt into it more. And I was like, no, it's going to be hurt. And then he's like, oh, well, like what's going on? And it just opened up this space for an invitation around unlayering what was really going on in a not, you did this to me. Because I think a lot of the time when we're in these spaces of not being able to communicate our needs, our wants, our emotions, our feelings, a lot of the time it's easy to shut down because it's like, it doesn't feel safe to feel potentially from something that's happened in your past. Or someone discounting your feelings, and that can happen, which can cause distance and can cause chaos and pain in the relationship. But just witnessing your emotions or your body sensation, allowing it to naturally open, it comes into a non-threatening space, in the space of curiosity. And if you can just be with someone as they observe themselves or vice versa, this is where I believe a lot of beautiful communication comes from, and curiosity rather than assuming, because it's so easy to make assumptions today about everything. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like, if we assume we're already then, if I start assuming about how you felt, right. Then I am inherently I'm not even going to be curious, right? Because I assume that I know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? And then inherently can go both ways, right? Like maybe then you assume that I'm going to know how you feel. Right. So then it just goes back and forth about like, why don't you know this about me? Or like, why didn't you pick up on these 20 clues that I left?
Because I'm not in your body.
Yeah. I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay. Like, I guess I should know. I'm so sorry. Right. And then then one person feels a bit of shame or, like, oh shoot, then it goes down that rabbit hole, right? And then it creates more disconnection.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
When
that's
it's
a whole nother show. We'll
yeah,
do
totally.
a connection show for sure on communication.
Yeah. Round two.
Round two. Yeah. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story with us. It's been really incredible. All of the lessons that you've learned and how I was able to go in and take moments and teach and go from there. If you were to leave our viewers, our audience with a message, your favorite quote, anything at all, one last message, what would it be and why?
Okay. Well, first off, thanks for having me here. Speaking of sweaty palms, my goodness, I have sweaty palms. I'm a little bit nervous for this. Ooh, I don't have a quote.
Give me anything that you want to share. But anything. Can just be your sweaty palms and nerves.
Yeah. Listen to your sweaty palms.
What are your sweaty palms here to tell us?
Let's see if I can channel the sweaty palms. No, I'd say like be willing to be uncomfortable, right? And knowing that being uncomfortable doesn't always mean that I'm not safe or that I'm not safe. That when I step into a sense of being uncomfortable, if someone is then reading this or listening to this, it's more so, can I be constantly curious about something that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, whether that's an experience, whether that's a possibility of going somewhere? Can I be curious about it rather than shy away from it? Yeah.
Love that. Curiosity. It did not kill the cat. Well, maybe it killed the cat, but it's not going to kill you. It's going to open up your entire world to
Yeah.
so many amazing gifts. So happy to have you here, Jeremy. You're awesome. If you want to learn more about Jeremy, all of his information is down below in the bio and the description of today's episode. If you love this episode, if you got a win, an insight, a takeaway from it, which let's be honest, you probably did. I did. We all did. We're all learning here. We're all growing. We're all shifting. We'd love to hear from you. Comment below if you are watching this potentially on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching it from. And if you love this episode or any of the episodes so far, or just Jeremy and you just think he's a cool guy, go ahead and leave us a review and tell us what you thought of this episode, what your biggest win insight is, and what you want more of. That's a wrap. Have an amazing day. Sending you all lots of love.